Officer Mitchell, a Caucasian male whose name is Mitchell, approached Agent Lisa Harper's vehicle, asserting that she vacated a parking space rightfully belonging to her. What initially appeared to be a minor disagreement swiftly escalated, culminating in a legal claim valued at $5.8 million and raising significant questions regarding the extent of an officer's authority. Before we delve further into the particulars, please share your geographical location in the comments section below and be sure to subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you absolutely will not want to miss. Officer Mitchell, age 42, was a patrol officer with more than 15 years of service on the force. His disciplinary record was extensive, featuring numerous complaints related to racial prejudice and aggressive conduct. Internal documentation detailed instances where he had detained individuals of color without probable cause, subjected minority colleagues to unnecessary scrutiny, and frequently exacerbated rather than diffused tense situations. Nevertheless, despite repeated warnings and internal reprimands, he remained in active duty, often lauded for his decisive nature and leadership qualities, while a consistent pattern of misconduct was conveniently disregarded. On that particular morning, Mitchell observed Agent Harper maneuvering her vehicle into her designated parking bay. Harper, 34 years old, was a distinguished federal agent with over a decade of experience in investigative work, undercover operations, and high-stakes assignments in the field. She carried herself with an air of confidence, her badge prominently displayed, her posture resolute. Mitchell, however, perceived neither her experience nor her authority. He saw a black woman occupying a space he presumed was off-limits to her. "You cannot park here," Mitchell stated without preamble, his tone firm, conveying an unmistakable finality. Harper remained unfazed. "This is my assigned position. My identification and credentials are clearly visible." Mitchell peered intently at her badge, his disbelief palpable. "I couldn't care less who you are. Relocate the vehicle." Harper's voice maintained its professional composure and clarity. "I possess every legal right to be here, Officer Mitchell. Should you require verification, the administrative office can confirm my assignment." Mitchell leaned marginally towards her vehicle, an overt attempt to assert dominance. Subtle prejudices were discernible in his posture and expression. He found it inconceivable that a black woman could legitimately hold the authority she evidently did. His history indicated a predisposition to view officers from minority backgrounds as either inexperienced or undeserving. This situation was no different. "Do you imagine your badge alters the established regulations?" he inquired, his words tinged with incredulity. Harper met his gaze directly. "In this specific instance, it does. Furthermore, questioning my authority based on assumptions rather than verifiable facts constitutes an overreach of your designated role." Mitchell's jaw tightened. For an extended period, he had employed intimidation as a means of controlling interactions, frequently targeting individuals he presumed would not challenge him. However, Harper demonstrated no outward signs of intimidation. She did not avert her gaze. She did not raise her voice. She simply asserted her lawful entitlement to occupy the space assigned to her. "You are making this unduly difficult," Mitchell grumbled, attempting an alternative approach. "Most individuals in your position would have simply complied." "Why prolong this?" "I am prolonging it because it is my obligation to uphold the law, not to concede to your assertions," Harper replied. Her tone was measured, yet each word resonated with authority. "You are exceeding your jurisdiction, and any further challenge to my right to be here will carry repercussions." Mitchell paused, a fleeting expression of vexation crossing his features. An undercurrent of racial bias, mingled with his astonishment, clouded his judgment. He was unable to grasp why someone like Harper would not be intimidated. "Look, I am merely enforcing the established protocols," he stated, endeavoring to reassert control. "I have no need to consult anyone else. You are personalizing this." "This is not personal," Harper responded with conviction. "It pertains to authority, established procedures, and the prevailing law. You bear responsibility for your actions, Officer Mitchell. Errors in judgment carry consequences." He glanced once more at her badge, a faint smirk forming, almost imperceptible. I have encountered individuals like you who presume entitlement to spaces where they do not truly belong. Harper's demeanor remained unchanged. My professional background, my qualifications, and my official position grant me the right to be here. Your unsubstantiated assumptions do not. The palpable tension between them thickened. Mitchell's implicit racism, his skepticism, his casual dismissals, and his assumptions regarding her capabilities were now starkly illuminated by Harper's authoritative presence. Every attempt he made to intimidate or assert dominance was met with placid professionalism, precise factual assertions, and unwavering self-assurance. A brief silence ensued. Harper observed the growing frustration, the internal struggle of an officer who had long relied on prejudice to manage confrontations. She remained silent, knowing it was unnecessary to speak. Her presence, her stance, and the law unequivocally supporting her were sufficient. Perhaps, Mitchell finally conceded under his breath, his voice a blend of irritation and disbelief. Perhaps this is not worth the effort. Harper maintained her resolve. She did not move until Mitchell physically stepped aside. This was not an act of submission due to intimidation, but rather a calculated move, having already achieved her initial objectives, asserting her authority, meticulously documenting the encounter, and transforming his bias into actionable evidence. What had begun as a standard parking dispute had effectively laid the groundwork for an extensive legal confrontation. The subtle dismissals, the skepticism regarding her authority, and the unchecked assumptions were all now a matter of official record, and Harper understood precisely how to leverage them. By the time she concluded her debriefing later that morning, the incident would be thoroughly logged, duly witnessed, and prepared for escalation. This was no longer about a mere parking space. It was a contest of power, authority, and accountability, and Officer Mitchell, for all his presumed experience and assertiveness, was entirely unaware of the substantial cost his assumptions would ultimately incur. Mitchell stepped back momentarily, his hands resting on his hips, as if contemplating his next approach toward Harper. "You possess a remarkable level of confidence," he remarked, his tone even but laced with incredulity. "Most individuals in your predicament would offer an apology and relocate. Are you entirely certain you comprehend the situation?" Harper's gaze remained unwavering. "I understand precisely what I am doing, and Officer Mitchell, confidence does not imply an overstepping of my authority. Rather, it signifies a thorough understanding of it." He emitted a brief, derisive chuckle that lacked any semblance of mirth. "You must be new to federal service. Typically, someone of your standing would simply adhere to instructions without creating a disturbance." "I am not new," Harper responded with steadiness, "and adhering to the law does not constitute creating a disturbance. It involves enforcing it. You are the one assuming authority based on personal bias, not established procedure." Mitchell frowned, this being the first discernible sign of frustration disrupting his carefully maintained composure. "Personal bias. I am merely endeavoring to fulfill my duties. Someone must maintain order in these spaces. Surely you comprehend, correct?" Harper raised an eyebrow. "Order, Officer Mitchell? This situation does not concern the organization of parking spaces. It pertains to the recognition and respect of legitimate authority. Your role is not to determine who is permitted to be here. That determination is beyond your purview." Mitchell shifted subtly, attempting a new strategy. His tone adopted a casual, almost patronizing quality. "I mean, look, I understand you are experienced. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but still, it is, unusual. You're a black woman standing here as if you owned the place. That is not a typical occurrence." Harper's response was measured, deliberate, and calm, the kind that effectively dismantled preconceived notions. "Officer Mitchell, what typically occurs does not establish legal precedent, and your disbelief does not grant you dominion over me." He narrowed his eyes, the subtle racism he had consistently relied upon for years beginning to falter against the stark reality of the situation. "You are truly unyielding. Most people understand their place. I understand my place, Harper stated, her voice gaining firmness. It is precisely here. Your assumptions about who belongs or does not have no bearing on my authority or my rights. Mitchell attempted to lean slightly closer, gesturing towards her vehicle. Rules are rules. You cannot simply decide they are not applicable to you. They are applicable, Harper affirmed, maintaining his gaze without faltering. I am acting in accordance with the law. You, conversely, are questioning my right to do so based on assumptions. That is the overreach in question. Several seconds of silence passed. Mitchell's frustration was evident, subtle, yet unmistakable. His implicit prejudices, his doubt regarding her capabilities, and his casual undermining of her presumed competence had encountered an individual who would not yield, someone whose authority was not subject to debate. He attempted again, his tone softer, this time aiming for an air of reasonability. Look, I am not asserting that you are technically incorrect, but it is simply, unexpected. Typically, individuals like yourself do not, well, you understand. Harper's eyes hardened slightly. I do understand, and individuals like me is irrelevant. The law is what matters, and at this moment, Officer Mitchell, you are exceeding your authority. Mitchell exhaled sharply, muttering under his breath. His assumptions, honed over years of practice to intimidate or undermine, had proven ineffective. He was confronted by a black federal agent whose knowledge, authority, and sheer presence neutralized every tactic he employed. Harper registered the tension, but did not break eye contact. Every subtle insinuation, every veiled expression of doubt was being observed, mentally catalogued, and recorded. Her strategy was straightforward: maintain composure, assert her authority, and allow his behavior to speak for itself. Any further attempts to intimidate me or compel me to vacate this space will be meticulously documented, Harper declared with clarity. Body camera, mobile device, witnesses, everything. This is not personal, it is procedural, and I assure you the ramifications of continuing this course of action will be severe. Mitchell hesitated. For years, he had depended on subtle prejudice and intimidation to manage situations. Now, faced with an individual who matched his authority with calm professionalism, he was compelled to reconsider. You are remarkably persistent, he finally stated, his voice notably subdued. I am, Harper confirmed, persistent in upholding the law, not in adhering to unsubstantiated assumptions, and that persistence serves to protect both myself and the integrity of this agency from individuals who believe personal bias can supersede established protocol. Mitchell's hand hovered near his radio, contemplating a call for backup, a fabricated complaint, a procedural escalation, any measure that might allow him to regain control. However, Harper's steady demeanor and unambiguous pronouncements rendered him immobile. The underlying racism that had fueled his actions now constituted his vulnerability, exposed by meticulous documentation and unshakable authority. Seconds stretched into an eternity, the tension thick, until Mitchell finally conceded, Perhaps, this is not worth the effort. Harper did not move. She did not display any outward sign of triumph. Every action, every word was part of a carefully orchestrated strategy. De-escalate, assert authority, and gather evidence. Her calm professionalism stood in stark contrast to Mitchell's disbelief and barely concealed agitation, thereby establishing a clear record of bias, harassment, and overreach. By the time Harper eventually disengaged from the confrontation, the incident had already begun its transformation into something far more significant than a simple parking dispute. Implicit prejudice, casual dismissals, and overconfidence had collided head-on with expertise, serene authority, and legal acumen. This was no longer a matter of a parking space. It marked the inception of a legal battle valued at $5.8 million, which would ultimately expose Mitchell's past transgressions, his ingrained assumptions, and the inevitable consequences of unchecked authority. By the time Harper returned to the federal building, word of the confrontation had already begun to circulate. Colleagues who had observed the palpable tension outside were now engaged in hushed conversations in the corridors. Several shook their heads, clearly aware that Mitchell had profoundly overstepped his bounds. Harper did not pause to offer explanations. She proceeded directly to her office, her focus entirely on the necessary subsequent actions. Every detail was crucial. Every move Mitchell had made had been meticulously recorded. Mitchell, seated in his patrol vehicle, exhibited clear signs of frustration. The encounter had unfolded in a manner entirely contrary to his expectations. He had approached Harper with an assumed confidence, believing his rank and perceived authority would intimidate her into submission. However, she had maintained her position with unwavering calm and clarity, demonstrating that her standing was not subject to his arbitrary questioning. For the first time in many years, his customary tactics had failed to yield the desired results. Within the confines of the building, Harper immediately initiated contact with her supervisor. "Officer Mitchell confronted me at my designated parking space," she explained. "I did not yield, and I have documented every aspect of this incident. Body camera footage, my personal mobile device, and witness accounts all corroborate the event. This matter requires thorough review." Her official report set the wheels of bureaucracy in motion. Human Resources commenced an inquiry, taking into account Mitchell's documented history. Previous complaints pertaining to bias and aggressive behavior now assumed significant relevance. This was demonstrably not an isolated incident. The confluence of Mitchell's past encounters and Harper's comprehensive documentation revealed a pattern that could no longer be overlooked. By midday, the legal department was apprised of the situation. The incident, initially a seemingly minor parking dispute, was rapidly escalating into a far more serious matter. Harper's professional conduct stood in sharp contrast to Mitchell's actions. While he had relied on conjecture and intimidation, she had based her response on factual evidence, established procedures, and a calm assertion of authority. Mitchell's colleagues began to notice a discernible shift in how his actions were perceived. Officers who had previously tacitly condoned his behavior were now quietly questioning his judgment. His assumptions regarding authority and control were subjected to intense scrutiny. The incident had unequivocally demonstrated that his methodology for handling situations could no longer proceed without consequence. Concurrently, Harper continued with her professional responsibilities, although her thoughts remained preoccupied with the recent confrontation. She meticulously reviewed her notes, verified witness testimonies, and ensured that every single detail was accurately recorded. Each interaction with Mitchell, every question he posed, and every challenge he issued would become an integral part of a comprehensive record definitively illustrating his conduct. Mitchell's frustration intensified. He had attempted to reassert control, but Harper's composed, resolute responses had left him exposed. He had presumed that his years of service and the inherent authority associated with his rank would be sufficient. However, Harper's self-assurance, bolstered by legal standing and concrete evidence, rendered him vulnerable. By the afternoon, the initial formal complaint had been officially submitted. Eyewitnesses corroborated Harper's account. Video evidence definitively supported her narrative. Mitchell's behavior questioning her authority, challenging her presence, and assuming unwarranted dominance was meticulously documented. There was no longer any room for denial. The situation rapidly garnered the attention of senior officials. Investigators commenced a comprehensive review of Mitchell's prior conduct. Recurring patterns became apparent. Disputes where he had confronted civilians of color or minority officers. Instances where he had asserted authority without legitimate justification. Harper's experience and preparedness had effectively transformed a tense encounter into a clear-cut case of official misconduct. Even beyond the confines of the building, the narrative began to disseminate. A few individuals who had witnessed the confrontation shared their accounts online, drawing attention to the altercation. Mitchell's actions were no longer confined to office gossip. They were becoming public knowledge, thereby establishing a foundation for accountability. As the day drew to a close, Mitchell faced direct inquiries from his supervisors. "Explain your actions this morning," one officer demanded sternly. He struggled to provide a coherent justification for his behavior. For many years, assumptions and intimidation had sufficed. Now every single move he made was subject to recording, and every word he uttered was being scrutinized. Harper's professionalism and meticulous preparation had effectively cornered him. Harper, meanwhile, maintained her calm and composed demeanor. She had anticipated such an escalation. Every report filed, every piece of evidence collected served to strengthen her case. Her approach was elegantly simple: maintain professionalism, document every interaction exhaustively, and allow the antagonist's actions to speak for themselves. By evening, it was abundantly clear that the incident had transcended the boundaries of a mere parking dispute. Mitchell's conduct had unequivocally exposed his inherent biases and his exaggerated sense of self-importance. Harper's demonstrated authority, her serene professionalism, and her strategic documentation had irrevocably set the stage for a significant legal confrontation. What had commenced as a brief standoff in a parking lot had evolved into a pivotal moment. Harper's decisive actions served to delineate the limitations of unchecked authority and underscored the profound impact that standing firm and understanding one's rights can have on the outcome of even the most volatile situations. The initial steps toward the $5.8 million lawsuit were already in motion. Mitchell's assumptions, his profound disbelief in Harper's legitimate authority, and his persistent challenges had collectively created an irrefutable record that could not be disregarded. The situation had evolved far beyond a singular officer and a parking space. It had become a critical issue of accountability, the pursuit of justice, and the definitive consequences of ingrained prejudice. By the time Harper departed from the office that evening, she was acutely aware that the subsequent actions would be paramount. The incident had escalated into a legal battle that would not only expose Mitchell's specific transgressions, but also address the broader societal issue of authority being systematically misused. The confrontation had been meticulously documented, with every challenge noted and every word recorded. The stage was definitively set for a narrative that would hold those in positions of power accountable, and this was merely the commencement. The lawsuit had been officially lodged. Officer Mitchell now confronted a claim amounting to $5.8 million, citing grounds of harassment, racial prejudice, and the abuse of his official authority. Every statement made, every recorded interaction, and every witness account collectively painted an unambiguous picture. Mitchell had unequivocally exceeded his designated authority, relying on assumptions and intimidation tactics that were no longer tenable. The subtle skepticism he had displayed toward Harper, his unwarranted questioning of her authority, his disbelief in the validity of her credentials, and the casual manner in which he attempted to assert dominance had all become central pieces of evidence in the legal proceedings. Where he had anticipated that intimidation would be effective, Harper had responded with unwavering calm, precision, and firmness. Her professionalism had not only served to protect her, but had also effectively transformed his actions into a legal record from which he could not escape. As the weeks progressed, internal investigations unearthed a consistent pattern of misconduct. Mitchell's past incidents, which had previously been overlooked or minimized, were now subjected to rigorous examination. Allegations of bias, unnecessary confrontations, and challenges to the authority of minority officers collectively formed a coherent and incriminating narrative. Harper's meticulous documentation had ensured that the rule of law would take precedence over unfounded assumptions and deep-seated prejudice. The agency and city officials found themselves subjected to intense public scrutiny. Colleagues of Mitchell observed the unfolding legal case with evident concern. The story had evolved beyond a simple parking space incident. It had become a broader statement regarding accountability within law enforcement agencies. Harper's professional experience, her unwavering confidence, and her strategically executed actions highlighted the potential for the misuse of authority and the severe consequences that result when such misuse goes unchecked. For Mitchell, the ensuing days were fraught with tension. He faced interrogations from supervisors, internal affairs investigators, and legal counsel representing the plaintiff. He had operated for years based on assumptions, but now those very assumptions were being subjected to intense scrutiny. Harper's calm and detailed handling of the incident had left him exposed, with no straightforward avenue to regain control. The legal team meticulously preserved every detail pertinent to the case. Harper had anticipated the legal ramifications from the outset. Each step she had taken, standing her ground, recording interactions, filing official reports, contributed to the construction of a clear, undeniable case. Her authority had never been legitimately questioned in terms of legality or procedure. Only Mitchell's biases had ultimately betrayed him. As the lawsuit advanced, the weight of the evidence continued to mount. Testimonies from witnesses vividly described how Mitchell had confronted Harper in her own designated parking space, repeatedly questioning her competence and authority. Video recordings captured the precise moments of escalating tension, the instances where Mitchell assumed a position of dominance, and Harper's calm, firm rejoinders. These combined elements formed an unassailable record. Beyond the formal legal proceedings, public interest in the case steadily grew. The narrative circulated widely, serving as a stark reminder that harassment and bias could no longer remain concealed behind official rank or procedural technicalities. Harper's actions emerged as a compelling case study in professionalism, courage, and the critical importance of being aware of one's legal rights. Where Mitchell had sought to assert authority through intimidation, Harper had relied on her knowledge, thorough preparation, and the inherent strength of the law itself. By the time the case reached the courtroom, it was evident that the outcome would carry significant and lasting repercussions. Mitchell's professional career and personal reputation were placed directly on the line. Harper had not only successfully defended herself, but had also established a significant precedent. True leadership carries a burden of duty, and partiality invariably brings repercussions. The judicial proceedings were fraught with tension, yet they unfolded with admirable clarity. Each documented exchange, every submitted piece of evidence, and each sworn statement was meticulously laid out. The undercurrent of suspicion, skepticism, and objections raised by Mitchell stood in stark opposition to Harper's direct, evidence-based, and composed demeanor. This striking dichotomy left no room for ambiguity in the minds of those evaluating the matter. Mitchell had evidently allowed personal prejudice to guide his actions rather than adhering to established protocols. When the announcement of the $5.8 million resolution was made public, it reverberated with considerable impact. Mitchell's flawed judgments, his excessive self-assurance, and his unsubstantiated suppositions had resulted in financial and professional repercussions from which he could not extricate himself. Harper, conversely, had proven that steadfastness, diligent record-keeping, and a firm grasp of one's mandate could indeed alter the trajectory of even the most challenging adversarial situations. The narrative did not conclude within the confines of the courtroom. Harper's decisive actions transformed into a significant lesson for law enforcement personnel, members of the public, and anyone who harbored the notion that power could supersede fairness. It served as a potent reminder that diligence, thorough preparation, and a composed professional attitude possessed the strength to counter intimidation and prejudiced viewpoints. For those observing the unfolding events, the salient point was undeniably evident. What commenced as a trivial disagreement over parking ultimately evolved into a profound declaration. Unchecked preconceptions and ingrained bias carry significant ramifications. Furthermore, bravery coupled with diligent preparation has the capacity to decisively shift the balance. If you hold the conviction that accountability is paramount and that no individual should be exempt from legal scrutiny, ensure you subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for additional narratives that expose the reality beneath the veneer of authority. The story slated for tomorrow is one that you will unequivocally not want to overlook.